Good morning, everyone. Sweet Money here, and welcome back to another episode of Hack My Labor, the Starbase tutorial series where we learn to do cool things by experimenting with our Laborer module. Today we're going to be working on a highly requested and anticipated asteroid approach system. Before we get started, just a quick reminder to hit the like button if you've been enjoying this series, and maybe subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one. I stream every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday on Twitch. You can follow me there if you want to watch me figure this stuff out live. Okay, let's get to it. Lucky for us, we just added a lot of forward-facing thrusters, so we're not going to need this tiny little maneuver thruster up front anymore. Its central location is going to make a prime spot to stick a rangefinder that we can use for automatically approaching asteroids. Start by unbolting the thruster in the very front of your ship and putting it in your inventory. Craft yourself a rangefinder if you have the research unlocked already, or hit up the auction house to buy one. They're pretty cheap right now. Just auto-bolt that sucker into the spot where your thruster was, and that's all the manual labor we're doing today. Now open up your universal tool in data mode with U while hovering over the rangefinder. We're going to rename a couple of fields in order to save us some space in our YOLO. The rangefinder on state field we're going to rename to app, which will stand for approach. This field gets set to 1 in order to turn on the laser, or 0 to turn it off. Then set the value of rangefinder search length to 1000, which will be the length of the rangefinder beam in meters. Lastly, change the rangefinder distance field name to APD to represent the approach distance. This field reports the current length of the beam, so if the beam is hitting something, it will report how far away it is. Next, we're going to use that last remaining button in our cluster of simple buttons to turn on and off the approach mode. Rename the button state field to app. Now let's head to the back of the ship and do some YOLO. You should still have a socket that's not being used. Grab an extra basic YOLO chip, insert it into the empty socket, and get ready to start writing some code. Bear with me, most of this is just math. I'm going to try to explain what's happening the best I can. We start line 1 by defining a handful of variables we can tweak later if we need to. We'll set T to 50, which will represent our thruster maximum. So we're only going to use 50% of our thruster power at the maximum distance from an asteroid. TM is going to be 3 and represent our thruster minimum. This will keep our thrusters going when we get really close to our target, so we don't crawl to a stop before we get in range. MX is going to be the maximum closeness towards the asteroid. So in this case, we don't want to be any closer than 13 meters. MN will be the minimum closeness we want to get to, so we'll make sure we get to at least 20 meters away. Then BT represents our backwards thrust. This is going to be the maximum amount of backwards thrust we want to give if we get too close. Lastly, we save a little bit of space by setting a variable called GMN, or I like to think of it as greater than minimum. We set that to :APD greater than MN, which will make it 1 if our approach distance is greater than our minimum closeness. Otherwise, it'll be 0. We finish the line by just checking if our app button is off and going back to line 1 if it is to check again. Now the meat of the script comes on line 2. We're setting our FCU forward to move the ship forward. We start with :app and multiply it by the rest of this line, so we set our forward thrust to 0 if the app button is off. Then the first calculation is determining what our thrust should be set to based on the distance reported by our rangefinder. We subtract our minimum closeness and then divide by 1000 to get a number between 0 and 1. Multiply that by our thruster maximum and we know how much thrust we need. So for instance, if we're 900 meters away, we should get 0.9, which we multiply by 50 to get 45 as our current thrust level. Then we add our thruster minimum if the distance is greater than our minimum target. We multiply what we got so far for our thruster value by 1 if our distance is greater than our minimum target, or 0 if we're in range, so we'll make sure the thrusters are killed if we're close enough. And finally, we'll multiply by 1 if our distance is less than 1000. This last step will kill our thrusters if the range is 1000 again, because it means the rangefinder beam is no longer hitting anything. Without this, you'll end up speeding up if you ever veer off the asteroid you're targeting. Now on line 3, we set our FCU backward to compensate if we ended up drifting a little too far. We again start with :app and multiply it by the rest of the line, so we set our backward thrust to 0 if the app button is off. Then we subtract our current distance from our maximum closeness and divide by our maximum to get another number between 0 and 1. Multiply this by our backward thrust maximum so we know how much thrust to give the backward thrusters. Essentially, this will give it a little thrust if we're only 1 meter or so past our maximum, but the closer we get to the asteroid, the more power it will give to our backward thrusters. Then we multiply by 1 if the current distance is less than our maximum, or we kill the backward thrust if it's not. Finally, we go back to line 1 and do it all again. So to recap, once our rangefinder hits something, we start the thrusters and gradually give less power the closer we get. Once we get close enough, we cut the forward engines and probably start drifting forward. If we drift too far, we start enabling the backward thrusters until we're back in range. I feel like the numbers I use make a pretty safe approach, but feel free to fiddle with them to your liking. Let's get out there and test this out. We have an asteroid in the distance here. We can turn on our approach beam and line it up with the asteroid. Once we get a good fix on the asteroid, we can just let go of the controls and our script takes care of the rest. Depending on the weight of your ship, you still may need to tweak some of the numbers. This test ended up bouncing once before coming to a stop, and it was a little out of range of our asteroid once we did stop. I'll go ahead and adjust some numbers real quick that I think might help. I'll bring our maximum closeness down to 10 and our minimum closeness down to 17. Hopefully that'll get us to stop a little closer to the asteroid. Then I'll adjust the backward thrust down to about 50 and hope that prevents us from shooting too far back and needing to bounce forward again. Adjust these numbers little by little until you have the perfect approach no matter how heavy your cargo is. Just remember to run a lot of tests in the safe zone with varying amounts of cargo so you can be sure you're not going to smash headfirst into an asteroid while you're mining outside of it. Also, if you turn your approach off while in the middle of an approach, you may have to tap your forward and backward thrust to reset them. I'd advise moving the laser off of a target before turning approach off if you're still moving. So there you go. We have a pretty nice approach mode for our ship now. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was useful to you. If it was, please don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. I stream every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday on Twitch, where I do a lot of the experiments for these upgrades. Follow me over there if you'd like to hang out with us live. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one, but for now, please take it easy.